Get started. Good morning, everyone. Once again, I am Paris Procopis. I'm an account manager here at MIG, and welcome to our Security and Audit Tools with Microsoft Dynamics GP webinar. If you can give me, we have a couple of housekeeping items first to begin with. You can either listen to the webinar through your mic and speakers on your computer, or you can use telephone to dial in using the information provided if you want to dial in from just your phone. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit a question via our questions panel. And we'll have time for questions and answers after the presentation and demo. And here's a real quick agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about us, and then we're going to introduce you to FastPath. And then we'll have a live demo of FastPath, and then finally the question and answer period. First, a little bit about MIG. We specialize in the implementation of financial and business management systems. Through this, we help our customers streamline their processes and maximize productivity. The solutions we work with are Microsoft Dynamics GP, SL, CRM, SharePoint, and Business Intelligence. We've been in the business over 15 years, and we focus from mid-market to enterprise-level customers. MIG possesses many certifications. We are a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We are BBB accredited, and we are a GSA approved vendor for any government entities, and you can also take our webinars for CPA credit. And now I'm going to turn it over to Liz from FastPath. Liz?
Thanks, Paris. Yep, I'm here. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and taking time out of your day. Thank you so much to MIG and their team for inviting me to speak to you all a little bit about FastPath and about what we do and our products. Like Paris said, we will have a demo at the end of these slides, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So a little bit about FastPath. We are a security audit and compliance software company. What we do is we provide security audit and compliance tools for the Dynamics solution set. So we work with GP, SL, CRM, etc. We're going to really concentrate today mainly on what we're going to see is going to be related to GP, but I will indicate which products work with the different Dynamics solutions in case you are using different solutions in your organization. If you're using CRM or if you're using SL, etc., I will definitely point out what is appropriate where. FastPath was founded in 2004. Our headquarters are in Des Moines, Iowa. We are Microsoft Gold Competency ISV and ERP, and all that means is that our staff is certified in the different Dynamics solutions. We also have CPAs and certified internal auditors that work on staff, help us develop our tools, make sure we're following the latest accounting standards. So, can we prove it? Well, we have over 1,000 customers. We have installs across 30 countries and on 6 continents. We are certified for Microsoft Dynamics, and we were recognized by the Institute of Internal Auditors as an industry leader. And on the right-hand side of that slide, you just see some of our clients and also some of our audit partners. So the tools that we're going to talk about today, we do have an entire suite of tools. Each one of these tools is actually a separate product. They don't need to be purchased in the entire suite if you're interested. And they range from starting from the top of this list really to security and user provisioning all the way down through audit and compliance as we go down the list. And so Identity Manager is actually a new tool that we introduced earlier this year, late last year actually, earlier this year, and it allows you to request, review, and improve dynamic security without IT intervention. So basically what we have done is we've put workflow around the user provisioning process. Currently, what we found was our customers were saying, hey, at the end of the year when our auditors come in and ask us about new users that have been created in the system, they want to know who requested those users, if the requests were approved, or if security changes throughout the year, maybe somebody moved to a different role in the organization, if those were ever requested and approved. And we don't really have a process to do that. This is what our clients were saying. So we decided that we were going to build some workflow around that process so that you can request user security changes or request user security for a new user. And that request can go through an approval process. And you define the approval process in your organization. There could be multiple levels of approval. And then once that request is approved, then that user can get created. And that leads us into our Config AD tool. So when that user gets created, it will use our Config AD tool to link up their Active Directory account with their Dynamics account. So that gives them access to have single sign-on into the tool. They only have to remember one set of credentials now. They don't need to have a separate user ID and password for Dynamics GP. It will allow them to just be able to use their Windows authentication. We find that that makes the system more secure. People are a lot less likely to share their Windows credentials than they are their GP credentials. And it also enforces all of those password policies that you have in your organization, such as expiration, length and strength of password, special characters, etc., because GP does not have any of those provisions directly inside of its software. Our Audit Trail tool is a continuous monitoring solution that tracks all changes to critical data. Our Audit Trail tool is available for every Dynamics product out there. You as an organization decide what's critical, and we have some pre-built reports and templates to help you get up and going with that auditing very quickly. And our Audit Trail tool for CRM actually features what we call Privacy Audit. And what Privacy Audit does is it actually tracks not just data changes, but also data views. So if some of you are using CRM and you have compliance issues where you need to know not just who is changing data, but who's looking at data, maybe there's some HIPAA compliance requirements there or things like that, we have the ability to track views in CRM. So we can say who opened up a record just to look at it. Okay, so that is available. The Assure tool, again, works with all of the Dynamics products. And what the Assure tool is a risk-based security access review and segregation of duties analysis platform. What that tool does is it takes a look at the security that you've granted to your application, and it tells you based on that security where your potential risks are for your organization. So, for example, a very high-level example would be if you're looking at GP or SL, let's say, and you grant access to a user to create vendors, and you also give them access to pay those vendors, technically that's a risk. Now, our tool is not a preventive tool. It doesn't stop them from doing their job. But what it does is it highlights that this risk does exist in your system now, and you now have the ability to document how you're going to mitigate this risk in your organization. Does security need to be changed? Maybe it does. Maybe you need to go and make some changes there. But if security is indeed appropriate, then hopefully you have some controls around that risk and you can document what those controls are. And our tool allows you to do that so that you can have comprehensive risk management right out of the system to be able to show the auditors that you understand where your risks are and you have controls around those risks. And what that does is that allows the auditors to spend time testing those controls, making sure that they are indeed in place and they are appropriate, but you've done all the legwork for them, so you eliminate a lot of time that your auditors actually spend in your organization. Okay, and that elimination of time that they spend in your organization actually translates to more money saved, less audit fees. So there's a pretty good ROI on that tool. And then finally, both Audit Trail and Assure have their own sets of out-of-the-box reports. Audit View takes those reports one step further, allows you to design, assign, and schedule them so that they can be automatically delivered to users on a scheduled basis. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we go through the live demo. Okay, so from here, we're ready to get into the demo of the tools, and I'll just share my screen in a second. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start in what we call our Grc Studio. Now, our Grc Studio was not a product that you saw on my product list because it's actually not a product, it's just the house for all of our different products. So once I log in here, what you're going to see is on the lower left-hand corner all of the different modules that I spoke about. We'll see Identity Manager, Assure, Audit Trail, etc. Now, I will say, as we're getting ready to start the demo, this is going to be a high-level overview. We have about an hour for the webinar, and we need to leave time for questions and answers, etc. So we're not going to get entirely in-depth into every single product. However, if there is something that interests you and you would definitely like to find out more, then what you can do is contact MIG after this webinar, and we can set up a one-on-one demo where we can go further in depth into all of the products. Okay, so we're gonna see quite a bit of the functionality. We just don't have time to cover every single bit of the functionality. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll actually start with Identity Manager, since that was the first product that I identified on the product listing. And Identity Manager is the area where we can go ahead and set up new users, request that access for those users, etc. And so within this tool, we can set up approval rules, and we can set up rules based on groups of users or individual users, and you can have multiple levels of approvals, etc. So here we say that there's a rule that if the requester is Liz, then the approver needs to be Boucher. Or the rule is if the requester is a member of the group called AP, then a member of the manager's group, and actually two members of the manager's groups, have to approve that request. Or if the role that you're requesting is power user, then the approver has to be Cassidy. Okay, so you can do it based on not just the users that are making the request, but the roles that are being requested for the users. Okay, and when we go ahead and we create a new user, we have the ability to actually select a user that already exists in the system. Okay, so we can do a search on users that already exist, and we can put in a request to actually modify their current security. So if they already have access to Dynamics GP, and we just need to change the roles or add a new company or something like that, and we can go through the request process. Or we can do conditional security requests. So if we wanted to do something where Jeff was going to have to be the AR clerk for only a specific period of time, okay, so if we wanted to go to a role or a company and grant him access to a specific role for only a period of time, we could do that. We could put some effective dates on here. Maybe he's covering for somebody who's going out on leave for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and so we want Jeff to have that access, but we only want him to have it during that time period. We can select that request with effective dates. Okay, or if we had a new user coming on board altogether, we could set up the new user here, and we would put in their information. So we would put in their first name and their last name. So we're going to have Harry, and we're going to have his last name is Styles. And sorry, my daughter's a big One Direction fan. We can put in some information for email, job title, etc. Again, temp users. Oh, I think I'm no longer the presenter. Can we get that switched back so I'm the presenter again, guys?
Let's take a look at that and see what happened.
Okay, thank you.
Bear with us for a second, folks. Sorry.
Right?
There we go.
Okay, good. So again, if Harry was just coming on board temporarily, let's say we were hiring a temp for the busy season, we could put effective dates around his access here as well. So it doesn't have to be just on the role, it could be on the entire actual user. And then you notice here, we have some applications down here that we can grant access to. So we can actually make the request for additional applications, not just Dynamics applications. However, the only thing that we can't do is if there was security rules that we would have to request for those additional applications, we would only be able to see the, we would only be able to send an email to the administrator of that application to say, hey, a new user is coming on board. But at least it gets that process started as well. So we are going to grant access to Dynamics GP, and we're also going to grant access to TalkSwitch. Okay, and once we do that, then we go to the Dynamics GP tab, and here we can go ahead and set up their security. So we can set up the login type, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we talk about config ID itself, but we have with the, because the Identity Manager encompasses config ID, you can set them up as a single sign-on user or single sign-on password required or standard. And I will get into what the login type means in a little bit more detail when we go ahead and get into the config ID tool. We can determine what companies this user should have access to, so we'll go ahead and drag that company over, and then what roles within the companies the user should have access to. So we'll see the list of all of the roles, and these are all coming right from your GP system. So if you have custom roles, anything that you add, you'll absolutely see here, and we'll make Harry the bookkeeper. And we're going to go ahead and submit this request. So when we go ahead and submit this request, what's going to happen is I'm very quickly going to see this tool will very quickly allow you to see what types of conflicts you're creating, and those conflicts are tied into our Assure tool, which I'm going to go into next. But those conflicts are just telling us, okay, if we grant Harry this access, these are the potential risks we take in the organization. So, you know, he has access to all these different items by giving him the, and these are the potential risks that we're taking. And if we're okay with this, then we would hit continue. If we weren't, we would go back and maybe change some of the access around. But we're going to go ahead and hit continue. This is fine. And we have to add a note once we're done with that. And we can say, Harry is the new bookkeeper starting on 5/15, reporting to Sandy Harris. Okay, and so we can go ahead and submit this request now. And so now this request will go over to the approver depending on what we have requested. So if I go over to my open requests, I can see this request out there. And if I just sort by requested date, I can see that here is the request for Harry Styles, and if I expand this, I can see who the approvers are, so this has to go to Boucher. I can see what has been requested, etc. So I have all that information available in the open requests. And then if I had anything to approve, if I was set to an approver, I would have some outstanding approvals here, and I would have anything that I needed to approve, and I can see all approvals here. Who the requester is, who the new user is, and I can look into these if I wanted to and just see some more information, so I can see if there's any errors, who the approvers are, if there were any approvals so far, etc. So I have all of that information available. So we have a pretty robust system here in terms of being able to set up new users. And this tool actually goes as far as if you set it to do so under the administration. We can go to the configuration of the Identity Manager, and we can even determine how we want the Active Directory account created for the user. We can have it auto-create that Active Directory account, or it can just be IT department creates those users, or we can say those users have to exist before we can even request their access. So we can configure this to whatever works best for your organization. Okay, this is where we would set up any additional applications. So that Identity Manager is great because now all of your user requests, everything is being tracked. It's all in one system, you know, with a great audit trail as to who has requested access, who's approved that access, etc. Okay, it's all in one tool. I'm going to hop out of here for one quick second, and we're going to go into the Config AD tool very quickly. So if you didn't want the Identity Manager piece and you just wanted the single sign-on for Dynamics GP, the Config AD, you can purchase that separately. Identity Manager does contain Config AD within the tool, but if you just want Config AD by itself, you can absolutely purchase that separately. And with Config AD, there are two distinct ways of getting into the software. The first is the Config AD desktop, which can be installed anywhere. It does not require that you have access to the domain controller, does not require that you have access to Active Directory in any way, or you make any changes to Active Directory. And what this does is it simply reads from the domain and it returns all of your users. And then from here you can click on a user and click Configure Dynamics User and set up that user in Dynamics GP as a single sign-on. This can also be used for Dynamics CRM. So it does work for Dynamics CRM as well. And when we go ahead and connect, we can set up this user. Now, if the other way of getting into the tool, I said that there were two ways. One is the Config AD desktop, which I just showed you. The other is right through the Active Directory Users and Computers console. It works the same way. The tool, you don't get any difference in functionality. It's just a difference in access. Here, this would require a small schema extension to be installed. And what that schema extension does is it just adds a right-click menu item that says Configure Dynamics User. Okay, and then when you click on that, then you go through the same exact process as you would from the desktop. So it completely depends on how you want to deploy it in your organization. When you come here and you set up the user, the very first thing that we have to do is we still have to set up the underlying SQL user. That does not go away. That is a requirement from Microsoft that they haven't gotten rid of. What we do is we just set that SQL user equal to the Windows user ID, the SQL password equal to the Windows password. We build an association there. So when we go ahead and do that, we can add a note. This is a self-auditing tool. If you would like to add some notes, you can. I'm not going to in this instance. The user's been created. And then we set the login type. So I know I spoke a little bit about the login type when we were talking about Identity Manager. I'm going to expand on that a little bit further. Single sign-on is what we consider our true single sign-on. You authenticate to the environment where Dynamics GP is installed. And it can be your computer, your desktop if you're deploying via a FAT client. It can be a Citrix environment. It can be a Windows Terminal Service environment. It can be any way that you deploy into GP. Once you authenticate to that and you click on the GP icon, if you're set to single sign-on, it will automatically push in your user ID and your password. So your Windows user ID and your Windows password will get pushed in, and as long as you have GP access, then you'll be allowed into the system. Does not require any further input from you other than clicking on the icon. If you have single sign-on password required, then what happens is you, when you click on the GP icon again, you authenticate to the environment where GP is installed. You click on the GP icon, your Windows ID will be pushed in. You will have to enter your Windows password to gain access to the system. And that is for maybe somebody that has access to confidential information. Maybe you have an HR payroll user in your organization and you want them to have the single sign-on experience. You want them to only have to remember one set of credentials. But if they log into their machine in the morning and they walk away to get a cup of coffee, you don't want somebody to just click on the GP icon and be able to run a smart list of salaries and social security numbers, etc. So you might want to give them that extra layer of security. Okay. And then finally, the last login type is the standard login type. What that standard login type does is it allows you to log in with your Windows authentication, your Windows ID and your Windows password, or if you're an administrator of the system, maybe you need to log in with a SQL user ID and password such as the SA user ID and the SA password. And if that's the case and you need that type of access, you would have the standard login type. What that does is that leaves both the user ID field and the password field available to key in, and this really is for your more administrative type of user that might need to log in as SA or DynSA or something like that. Okay, so we're going to make us on here single sign-on, and then if you're using GP 2013 or above, we have the statuses, whether they're active or inactive or a lesson user, and if they're a full or limited user. And then from here, just like we would in GP, we can set up what companies the user should have access to. We will see all of the companies listed here. We can see the roles the user should have access to along with the alternate modified profile. So we'll make us on here our accounts payable clerk, and we can go ahead and save this. And again, I'm going to have a message here about how many segregation of duties conflicts I'm creating simply because I have the Assure tool installed, but we're going to go ahead and click yes here on the procedure, And again, I can add an additional note if I need to. So it is a self-auditing tool, like I said. But this is as simple as creating a user here. And so now Asan can go into the tool or into GP and use his Windows authentication. And we didn't have to go into GP and go to 3 separate windows and enter that system password 3 separate times. It's all done right here in one panel. Very easy to set up new users. Okay, and there are also some really neat additional features of this tool. The very first is the disable delete feature. If we enable this feature, if you disable or delete a user in Active Directory, your Dynamics GP user will be disabled or deleted. So we keep the two systems in check, so you don't have what we consider orphaned users in GP, users that are no longer with the organization but still have a logon, because auditors tend not to like that very much. Okay. The other thing that the tool has as a feature is an auto logout feature. So you can set this to a period of inactivity. The minimum has to be 30 minutes, but you can set it to whatever you'd like. And this will log out users that are just sitting in GP doing nothing. There's no SQL processing going on. There's no database or table locks. Basically, they've logged in, they've done an inquiry or two, and now their license is just in the system and they haven't logged out. And this is great for companies that routinely run out of licenses when users are trying to log in because of that fact, or because maybe they're deploying via terminal services or Citrix and users are not doing file exit, but rather they're just clicking the red X in the upper right-hand corner and closing their session. And so that leaves a hung user in GP. This will eliminate that issue as well. And then finally, what's an awesome feature of the tool as well is the Active Directory group security feature. If you enable this, not only can you grant access to individual users, just like we did here, but you can actually set up security for an Active Directory group. And again, you can do that from the ADUC or right from the Config AD desktop, either way, however you want to deploy. We can go ahead here and set up security, and I'm just going to pick the AP clerk group, and if I configure this Dynamics group here, again I'm going to log in just like I would if it was a user. I can set what login type members of the group should have access to, what companies members of the group should have access to, and then what roles within the companies members of the group should have access to. And so I can see here that if I was a member of this group, I would have access to AP clerk and contract administrator. And so now a new user comes on board and we can request their access, and within Identity Manager we can just assign them to a group, or right here, if we're not using the Identity Manager tool and we're just doing this right through Active Directory, we can just say add to a group, and if we add them to that AP clerk group, they automatically get their user ID set up and they're granted that access to those companies and roles, and I don't have to touch them. I don't have to do anything to them. Okay? And a user can be a part of multiple groups. They don't have to belong to just one group. So maybe you have a couple of different groups based on some different roles, and a user has to have access to 2 or 3 of those groups. You can certainly do that. Okay? So now I'm going to go back into the GRC Studio, and we're going to talk a little bit about the auditing and compliance tools that we saw. We're going to talk a little bit about the Assure and the Audit Trail. So with the, I'll start with the Assure tool. This is our segregation of duties analysis tool. This is what's going to tell you where your risks are based on the security that you've granted. So within this tool, you'll see we have a bunch of reports that come out of the box, and we have a bunch of GP security reports out of the box. So if you want to take a look at a user's security, we don't want you to have to bounce between our product and Dynamics GP. You can most certainly go into Dynamics GP if you please, but you don't need to. You don't need a Dynamics GP user license to use this tool. So if you want to grant access to this functionality to somebody who doesn't have access to GP, that's okay. You can do that. So here I can see the users and the roles that they've been granted in Dynamics GP. I can see the company access matrix, so what companies users should have access to. I can see what the roles actually are giving access to, what tasks are part of roles, etc. So I have all of that information. Who's set up as a power user? This is really important. because power users do not show up on security reports. So you want to keep track of who's set up as a power user. You want to limit that power user functionality in GP actually, okay? So we give you that. We have posting setup reports. So you can see if somebody is posting in GP, what is happening? Is it creating, does it require a batch approval? Is it posting to or posting through? So we have all of that information right here in the homepage area of the Assure tool. And so then from there, the other features of this tool is if you really and quickly wanted to see who had access to do something in GP, you could do that here in form access. So if I needed to see who had access to create vendors, I know that my vendor card window is actually called vendor maintenance, and the reason why I know that is those form names are always found in the upper right hand corner of any window that you have open in GP. So if I was to go to the purchasing module and go to cards and vendor, that's actually opening the vendor maintenance window, and so I want to see who has access to that window. So I'm going to find the window called vendor maintenance here, and this is a list of all of the windows available in Dynamics GP. Everything that's in your system, including third-party windows. And we click go, and we can see very quickly here who has access to the vendor maintenance window. And not only who has access, but if I click on any one of these users, in the right-hand side here in the details pane, it's going to tell me what role and what task is giving them that access. So if I wanted to change, if I saw somebody here that shouldn't have this access, you know, I see Liz here, and Liz is gaining access via the accounting manager role. So maybe she shouldn't have that role because I really don't think she should be creating vendors. I need to go back and make some security changes, okay? And I can do that for any, so if I wanted to see who could create customers, I could go to the customer maintenance window and I can click go. So I can very quickly, easily see who has access to the different pieces of my system. And if you want to look at, in any one of these reports, anything that I have in this grid here, I can print, I can export. I have 8 different file types. I can reorder this grid. I can filter on anytime you hover your mouse over the blue header row, you'll see a key comes up for every column, so we can do a filter, we can do a sort, we can group. So if I wanted to group by something here, I could. Anything like that is available. So, and if I really quickly and easily, like if I had a bunch of these things that my auditors were asking me about, they say, hey, you know, who can open and close fiscal periods, who can create purchase orders, etc. I could go to every window individually, hit print, go to the next one, hit print. But I like shortcuts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Customize Critical Access. And Customize Critical Access, all critical access is a group of forms. That's it. And Customize Critical Access lets us build these groups. So I have a whole bunch of groups here. I'll create a new group and I will call it MIG Demo, and I'll add it. And so let's say that my auditors ask me about you know, who can create accounts. So that's account maintenance. So we'll go ahead and find that form and move it over. And then they also ask me about transaction entry. So who can create journal entries? So I'm going to go and move that. Fiscal period setup. So I'm going to go ahead and move that over. Things like that. So now I've created my group. I will close this. And so instead of having to look for everything individually, I can come to Critical Access and I can select my group. And so I'm going to select my group called MIG Demo, and I'm going to click Go. And I can quickly and easily see who has access to the different forms that I've selected. Now what I want to do is I want to sort on the form description. I'd like to keep them all together. And I'd actually like to make this the first column of my report. So I can just slide it over. Okay? And when I do that and I slide it over, now I can print this and it's going to print exactly what I see here, or I can export that. Okay? So I absolutely have the ability to go ahead and do that. But the biggest piece of the Assure tool is our conflict listing. And our conflict listing is the rule set that we have built for an out-of-the-box Dynamics GP install. When we say out-of-the-box Dynamics GP install, we have covered general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, sales order processing, purchase order processing, inventory, HR, and payroll. Okay, so we have analyzed all of those modules in Dynamics GP and come up with a very comprehensive list of all of the potential conflicts or risks that you may have based on the access that you grant in your system. And we followed a very specific framework. It's called the Coso Framework. We also followed guidelines from the ISACA segregation of duties remediation best practices. So we took all of these different auditing and accounting rules into consideration when we built this. And so it's very comprehensive. There's about 235 out-of-the-box potential conflicts. But this conflict listing can absolutely be edited and modified to fit your organization. If there's an additional module that you use, some people use one-stop job costing, other people use project accounting, manufacturing, etc. We can help you modify this conflict listing for your organization to tailor fit it to your organization. Okay, the out-of-the-box conflict listing covers about 90% of most companies, but there are some, like I said, that are using those different products, the OneSofts, the project accountings, etc., that could lead to additional conflicts that we would need to add into this listing. Okay. What we do with these and if we take a look at a couple of sample conflicts, let's say you had access to create GL accounts and you had access to do any of the journal entries. You could potentially maintain a fictitious account and create erroneous posting entries. Okay, so that's what we mean by a conflict. If you had access to cash receipts entry and bank transaction entry, it could potentially allow users to hide cash transactions posted and cash transactions collected. Okay, and so on and so forth. If you had access to create a vendor and actually pay that vendor or create an invoice for that vendor, payables transaction entry, it could potentially allow a user to maintain vendor information and create a payment to that vendor without review. Okay, so what do we do with these conflicts? Well, we look at users and we say, okay, for this specific company, we'll pick a user and we'll pick our new user, Asan. Asan is a new AP clerk that we created in the Config 80 tool. And based on the access that we granted to Asan, Asan has 19 conflicts to his name. He's got some conflicts here based on the access that he's granted. So the very first thing that we would take a look at is we would say, okay, for Asan, if we look at what he has access to, is it appropriate for his role in the organization? Do I see anything out of line here? So now Asan is an accounts payable clerk. If I saw anything related to customers or receivables or things like that, I might say, wait a second, his security was not set up correctly. Okay, so we would go and change that first and foremost. But what I am seeing is, he's got typical conflicts related to accounts payable, so we're okay with that. So now we want to start documenting our mitigations for those conflicts. So the way that we do that is in this status column, we have the ability to go ahead and document our mitigation. So I'm going to pick this one here with vendor maintenance and payables transaction entry, which can potentially allow him to maintain vendor information and create a payment to that vendor without review. So I'm going to click new here. And what this is going to do is this is going to open up the mitigate window. And when I go ahead and open up the mitigate window, I'm going to go ahead and select my mitigation/resolutions. I have all of this information here. These are out of the box, these 6 status or mitigation/resolutions, but we can continue to add more. We're going to go ahead and say that there's a review and approval process in place. There are some statuses, again, out of the box, but we can continue to add more. And I'm just going to say that this is a proposed. If Asan had access to multiple companies, we only have one company, you can mitigate all the companies at once so you don't have to do it over and over. And we can put in some notes and we can say, all vendors are tracked via Audit Trail, and those Audit Trail reports are reviewed weekly. All AP batches are password approved by a manager. Okay, and we're going to save that. So we're documenting what we're doing to mitigate this risk in our organization. So when our auditors come in, they don't have to spend time looking for the risks. They don't have to spend time doing the documentation. They're going to say, okay, show me those audit trail reports. Show me that they've actually been reviewed. Prove that to me. And then prove to me that the batches are being posted just by the manager. Okay, and you can do that with different reports that are available, et cetera. And you can do that with our Audit Trail tool. Now, if you have a lot of users in your system, right? You don't have to worry about mitigating every single risk manually, just like I did. So let's say this risk right here, vendor maintenance and select payables checks, which again could allow you to maintain vendor information, create a payment to that vendor without review. Maybe we have another AP clerk that's working with us and we've already mitigated that risk for another AP clerk. The mitigation isn't going to change user to user. Maybe it does, but in this instance it doesn't. I don't have to rekey everything. So I'm going to click on the tab that says similar mitigations, and I see that I've mitigated this risk for Carolyn Westby here. And I'm just going to click on that mitigation and it's going to copy it in. Okay, and again, it says all checks are batched and batch can only be printed once it is approved with a batch password. Okay, perfect. So I'll go ahead and hit save. So I don't have to retype everything over and over and over and over. Okay, we have the ability to do that. So this, like I said, these are all high-end overviews over high-level overviews of the products. So I'm going to move on to Audit Trail. In the interest of time, we have about 5 to 6 minutes left. We'll talk about Audit Trail, and then we'll have a question and answer period. But if there's more that you would like to see, or if you're interested in anything that I've showed you so far and anything that I'm going to continue to show you, please contact MIG and we'll set up an individual demo where we can see a lot more of the tools. Okay. So with the Audit Trail product, there is, and I'm going to give you my little disclaimer before I start anything on the Audit Trail. And my disclaimer is, it doesn't matter which Audit Trail product that you use. You can use ours, you can use one of the other competing products on the market. The Audit Trail product is only going to be as good as the configuration. Okay, and that configuration doesn't necessarily come from the system itself. All configurations are driven by the planning process in the organization. So if you're looking at any kind of an Audit Trail tool, and again, it doesn't have to be FastPaths, it can be another Audit Trail tool, please do the due diligence within your own organization first to understand exactly what it is that you would like to audit, and try to be as specific as possible, because that's going to be the key to any successful Audit Trail information, to make sure that you're auditing only the critical information for your organization. And you can get that down to a very granular level. For example, if you know you want to audit vendors, because you do have a lack of segregation of duties around your vendor process, you don't need to audit every field on that vendor card. It's probably not business critical if somebody changes the fax number. However, it probably is very business critical if somebody changes the check name or the remit to address, things like that. So do that due diligence within your own organization before you actually even go to configure an Audit Trail product. It'll make you much happier with whatever product you decide to go with. So that's my little, I put my little audit hat on and gave you my disclaimer before we started this. So with our Audit Trail tool, I'm not going to get into the configuration piece and how you actually set up what it is that you would like to audit, because of the interest of time. However, you do go into the system and you select right down to a granular level exactly what it is that you would like to audit. Once those audits are set up, we have a whole bunch of pre-built reports here. Pretty much anything that starts with GP is going to be an out-of-the-box report. So we have a report built for almost all of the most commonly audited areas of Dynamics GP. And then we can give you, under the administration tab, there is what we call a report generator. So we give you the ability to go ahead and continuously add reports to this section. So if we take a look at the report, our reports are very comprehensive. They are consolidated reports as well. So if you're running multiple companies within Dynamics GP, you can see all of the companies. And this actually subscribes, Audit Trail and Assure work with SL and CRM as well. Okay, the report layout is going to be a little bit different for CRM. For SL, it's pretty much the same. You still have your company name. Everything is pretty much the same. Okay, but we have here the company name, the table name that we're auditing, the primary field. So because we're auditing the GL account table, we have the account number, the field that's being updated, the event type. So whether it's an add, an update, or a delete, old value, new value, date, time, user that made the change, and this last column is the application where the change originated from. And so we see here that a bunch of these actually originated in Microsoft Dynamics GP itself, which is where we expect the majority of our information to come from, right? People are logging into the system and making changes, so the majority of our changes are going to come right directly from Dynamics GP. But if I scroll through this report, now I can see that I actually have some changes that were made in Microsoft SQL Server. So this tool goes above and beyond, telling you not only that changes were made, but also where the changes came from. So, you know, we see here an account description was changed. It was updated from cash to cash on hand, and it was done in Microsoft SQL Server. So this lends itself to a few questions. Why are the changes being made in SQL Server? Was there something wrong with the system? Do we have a help desk ticket that corresponds to that? Did I even know that this user had access to the back end of the tool like this, etc.? So we want to give you that whole picture of what's going on in the system. So from here, again, you can print these reports, you can export them, you can electronically sign off on them, right? One of the things that we talk about all the time when I talk about any audit trail tool, and again, I'm going to go back and say this, even if you don't go with our tool, if you do implement an audit trail tool, you need to review the reports. If you don't have a timely review process to review these reports, you know, and every report can have a different review calendar. Some might be daily, some might be weekly, etc. But the point is you have to review them. If you don't, then you're wasting money. So what the auditors want to see is proof of those reviews, and you can print these reports out and manually sign off on them and put them into a binder, but we all know, at least myself personally, I can't stand filing. I hate printing paper. It's a waste. So I can electronically sign off on this report right here within this module. Okay, and I can put in notes about the report, anything that I'm signing off on. It's going to capture the signing date and time, who's signing it, and it's going to capture the parameters of the report. So I know exactly what I'm signing off on. Okay, so I have all of that information available. And if I take a look at another report, so we have some pretty cool out-of-the-box reports, like I have a GL Post Approved summary here. And what this report does is it tells me, it's a quick summary of who's created journal entries, who was the last person to edit them, who was the last person to, if they required a batch approval, who approved them, who posted them, etc. So we have all of that information right here, because journal entries are always a key concern as to who's, you know, creating and posting them. So we have that here by journal entry number. That's a pre-built report that comes out of the system. Okay, and so very quickly in the very last minute that I have here, when we go back and talk about those audit trail reports, and if I go back to this GL open and close report, I talked for a second during the list of products about the audit view tool, which allows you to schedule those reports. So any report that we have up here in this window, like I said, we can print this, we can export it, we can electronically sign off on it. There's also a button that says Add to Schedule. The Add to Schedule is our audit view tool. You can schedule this to be automatically delivered to somebody or to be automatically delivered to a network location or anything like that. So I can just click on New Report. And maybe my GL account report only needs to be reviewed monthly. So I can say monthly account review report. I'll give it a description here, and I can make this a month-to-date, week-to-date, quarter-to-date, year-to-date report, previous month, year, week. So I'm going to do a previous month, and I'll have it delivered on the 1st of every month. If I wanted a daily report, I would do last number of days. I could even do a custom date range if I needed to. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And I can add filters. I'm not going to. And then here I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. And I can say who should get this and how they should get it. So I'm going to email this in Excel to Cassidy. I'm also going to email this in PDF to Cassidy and Boucher. Okay. So Cassidy's going to get both a PDF and an Excel version. And then I'm going to actually save this in a folder. And I can put it out on the network. If I have a SharePoint folder, I can save it there. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to that. And this is a monthly report, so I can choose the day of the month I want it sent on. I'm just going to have it sent on the 1st of every month. That's fine. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a start date. So we'll start it on June 1st, and we won't give it an end date. And we'll go ahead and click Next. Okay, and so now this report is ready to be scheduled, and it will be automatically delivered, and that is our audit view tool. Okay. So now, with that being said, I'm going to turn this back over to Paris, and just give me one quick second to do that. Oh, actually, hold on. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Okay. And as we said before, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question dialog box. We've got a couple here. Let's see. The first question, it says, "What version is this for?" And Anne Marie, you asked this. If you can please clarify what you mean. Are you meaning what version of GP or whatever, or SL this is for, or what are you looking at? And if that's the case, maybe we can approach it that way, Liz, as to what version of the ERP.
Yep. So basically, this tool works with all versions of GP, SL, and CRM, all the way through the newest GP 2015, CRM 2013, and SL 2015. So we are currently working with all of the newest versions. Now, if you're on an older version, we actually have clients, we have some clients that are just coming off of version GP6. We have clients on older versions of SL and CRM as well. What is dependent is not so much the version of the ERP, but the version of SQL Server that you're on. So we support 2005 and newer currently with the tools that you have seen. So if you're on SQL 2000, we do actually have a solution for you. It's just not going to look this nice.
Okay. All right. And then it says, here's another one. Why do we need config AD if GP has a single sign-in in GP 2013 and 2015?
So with that, GP 2013 and 2015 have certainly introduced the concept of identity management, as they are calling it. However, that is only available for the web client. It is not available for a traditional client in GP. So if you are looking for a single sign-on experience and are not eligible for the web client for whatever reason, you know, some ISVs don't work with the web client yet, there's not full functionality there. As of yet, I know they're quickly making improvements, and you're looking, you know, still to use the regular client, then you would need to use config AD, as Microsoft does not have a single sign-on solution for anything other than the web client.
Okay, and then what kind of performance impact is there from an audit trail?
So I'm going to give the politically correct answer of it depends, but what I mean by that is it really does depend on volume of transactions. It depends on amount of things being tracked. So this is where I go back and put that auditor hat back on and say, please do the due diligence, because there will be a performance impact with almost every audit trail tool out there on the market. As far as you're putting triggers on a database to collect information, and so the more triggers you have, the more impact you will have. However, I will say that the FastPath tool, number one, doesn't make any changes to the front end of the products themselves. We don't change any code in GP or SL or anything like that, so we're not adding an overhead that way. And we try to keep you know, any kind of performance impact to an absolute minimum. We've optimized the triggers as best as we can, but it really is dependent on volume of transactions going through the database every day, and how many audits you have on the system.
Okay, and it looks like that's the final question. So if you have any additional questions, I'll give you some contact information for us to get some clarification on that. So next slide, please. Okay, just wanted to offer you a Mig Customer Promotion. So you get a 15% discount on any FastPath software purchase between now and June 15th. And the software has to be purchased and paid for within that time frame, and we'll give you some information as to how to get a hold of us on that. Just also wanted to remind everybody that most of our customers are now moving toward our support plans. We offer several support plans for our customers that also includes support for not only the Dynamics products, but also any third-party related add-ons. That's also part of it. And these are all fixed rate plans. You get one invoice a year to pay instead of having multiple bills for multiple incidents, that type of thing. So it makes it easy. You can contact us at info@mig.com for that.
Okay, Paris, I apologize. There actually was another question out there. I see that there's a question. It's a two-part question. It says, since Assure provides risks associated with setup specified in Identity Manager, do you have to buy Assure if you purchase Identity Manager? You do not have to buy Assure with Identity Manager. It just will not allow you to mitigate those risks. So you will see the risks. There's just, you won't have the mitigation piece, but it is not a required purchase. And then the second part of that question is, will Assure provide security risks associated with standard GP security if you don't have Identity Manager? Yes, the risks in Assure are completely independent of Identity Manager. They're based on however the security is granted, whether you grant it via Identity Manager or you go into GP itself and create the users, you will still see those same risks because it's really based, at that point, we're not looking at Identity Manager or Config ID, we're looking directly at the GP security tables.
Okay, yep, and it looks like that question came in right at the end there. So, yep. All right, and then if you have any additional questions, definitely contact me if I'm your account manager, or you can contact us at info@mig.com. There is a survey at the end of this webinar. Please take the survey for us. It really helps us design, it helps us to evaluate and improve the webinars. We appreciate your feedback for that. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Liz, for your presentation. And if you have any questions, info@mig.com. You can learn more information at our website at www.mig.com.